Sorry. Can everyone hear my voice? Irene?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Jørgen Pedersen and I'm from Denmark, and I'm representing a small NGO organization called Vilde Bier in Denmark, native bees in Denmark. And I want to tell you about the state trends and measures for pollinators in Denmark. And my focus will be on the agriculture area, the farmed land in Denmark, because it's a lot of area in Denmark. My reference here is the red list of all Danish bees. And the state of wild bees in Denmark is actually based here on the Danish red list assessment from last year. And it, for the first time in Denmark, it deals with all the 292 species which have been registered in Denmark. It is the second red list of bees in Denmark. The first was put out in 2010, but that time it was only about the bumblebees, but I'll come back to that later. Just for a start, I want to introduce you for the red list categories. I think you are, perhaps some of you, quite familiar with them, but there are different categories we had to assess the wild bees into these boxes here. You can find them on the EUCN homepage. If you want to know more about the criteria, you have to look up there. The situation for the 292 species in Denmark is that some of them, actually quite big part of them, is actually not assessed here because they only occur very randomly, or we think they are on the establishment, so they are not assessed here. And that leaves 244 species which have been assessed. "19 species of the 244 species, they are estimated to be extinct in Denmark. And when can we consider a species to be extinct? Well, the criteria tells us that if it haven't been seen in Denmark for the last 50 years, we can estimate that it is extinct. 18 species, they are critically endangered. 70 species are endangered. 21 species are vulnerable. 26 species are near threatened. For 6 species, we don't have enough data to assess their risk of extinction, but it leaves 137 species that are of least concern. And that means that the conditions for them, they are, I don't know if the conditions are good for them, but they have a lot of individuals in Denmark. Here you can see the the percentages of different red list groups. 7% of all the species, and that's actually a quite big part, I think, they are extinct. 19% of them, they are critical endangered or vulnerable. But more than half of the bees, they are of least concern. I want to focus on the bumblebees because we have data for the bumblebees now in the red list from 2019, but also from the red list in 2010. And we can compare the change that have been here for the last almost 10 years. And yes, in Denmark, we have registered 29 species of bumblebees. Here you have some drawings of all the species, but some of them you see here, they are extinct in Denmark. What changes could we see from 2010 to 2019? Well, there have been some small changes. One more species have been assessed extinct, and one less species now assessed critical endangered. I think it's because it's extinct now. The number of species that now is endangered has grown from 1 to 3, and the number of vulnerable species are almost the same, and the number of these concerned species, they are also the same now, almost the same now. So actually no big changes for the bumblebees since 2010. I've shown the list, so you can see some of the changes. The Bombus campestris has actually increased since 2010, and it's the same for the Bombus homilis, which had also increased. The new one that is extinct since 2010 is Bombus ruderatus, and then we have 2 species that have declined. It's the Bombus sulvarum and the Bombus veteranus. The other species that are extinct already back in 2010 is the Bombus barbutellus and the Bombus pomorum and the Bombus quadricolor, which you can see here on the list. Well, if you don't know much about Denmark, I can tell you we have a lot of agriculture in Denmark. It's taking up a big part of the country. Almost 2/3 of Denmark's area is cultivated. It's farmed land, and it's almost, I think, a world record. So compared to Norway and Sweden, we have a lot of agriculture, and it's because of the geography in Denmark. We have good soil and it's very plain. The area with forest is growing these years. 200 years ago, we had only 2 or 3% of Denmark was planted with forest, but it's growing these years. The area with open nature, I think it's declining these years, and that is sad because a lot of the endangered species, they live there. And also the part of taken up by cities and roads and highways and things like that is also growing all the time. So there's not much space for bees in Denmark. And where do all the red-listed bees in Denmark live? Well, the majority of the bees, they actually live on dry and sandy grassland in open landscapes. And as I said, these areas, they are declining. Also in areas where we dig out raw material or in military areas, they are good areas because there are a lot of disturbance there. Open forest, the edges around the forests, and also there was some question earlier about the forest clearings. Yes, they are very important because when you clear forest, you have open land where you can have a lot of flowers. Also, the dunes and the cliffs at the coasts are very important areas for wild bees. Heaths, fresh and beech meadows, and also there's a lot of small habitats in the aerial land, but in many parts of the areas they are not connected. And then, of course, there are also urban areas. Only a small part of the bees on the red list are found in the farmed land. So the conclusion here is that the red listed bees, they live in areas that are not farmed. And that's, as you saw before, we don't have much of that in Denmark. Well, what threats do we have in Denmark? Well, I have already said a little bit about it, but the most important reason here for losing bees in Denmark, perhaps not species, but individuals is that we lose habitats all the time. And there's also a big lack of flowers. You should visit Denmark, then you will see it. The problem is that tall grasses and herbs and shrubs and trees, they grow all the time, and they shed out all the herbs, the flowering herbs. As I said, also there's a lack of disturbances in the uncultivated nature. Disturbances, well, you perhaps think it's not good, but actually it is good because it makes a lot of mess. It creates space for flowers and things like that. The landscape is more and more monotonized because we grow more and more grains in Denmark, like barley and wheat, and also corn or maize, and they are wind pollinators. They don't offer any nectar or pollen for bees. Also, we see some waste of nutrients to the immediate environment around the fields, and that means that the grass, it just grows and grows, and it doesn't leave any space for flowers. We lose the small habitats in the cultivated areas. We lose the fences, the field boundaries, perhaps some stone dikes are removed, the ditches and small sandy field roads. Sandy field roads, we know they are also important habitats for small soil-living bees. We have fewer and fewer flowering grasslands with clover because they are harvested for silage. Normally before, at the latest during flowering, the grass is used as feedstock for the intensive cow production we have in Denmark. Other threats are, well, when we treat the soil, when we plow the soil, we destroy all the nest in the soil close to the boundaries around the fields. We remove large stones, piles of stones, of large stones. We know they are good nesting places for bumblebees. Dead woods could also be nesting sites for at least some solitary bees. Pesticides are also a threat in Denmark, although we have some organic agriculture in Denmark. Most of the farm areas, they are sprayed every year with pesticides. Some of the pesticides, they could harm the bees directly. But I think
1 minute.
The main problem here, sorry?
1 minute left.
Well, the main problem here is that it reduces the wildflower just outside the fields. Some research done in Denmark has shown that. I could also mention intensive beekeeping. It could be in some places a problem for the wild bees because the honeybees, they will eat all the pollen and all the nectars, and then it will limit the food for the wild bees. So what measures do we do in Denmark? Well, as agriculture takes up relatively much space in Denmark, farmers and their advisors, they play a very important role in creating better opportunities for bees. They are doing webinars, or they could be on biodiversity or on insect-friendly farmers, as they did yesterday actually. They have intensive advice on spraying drift, reducing techniques in arable land. They also advise on equipment for fertilizer spreaders so that loss of fertilizers outside the field is reduced. They have campaigns on wild bees, become a bee-friendly farmer, as they launched 2.5 years ago, and it includes a number of recommendations, and they are rated. They also have flower stripe campaigns. As Aaron said in the beginning, we don't have a pollinator strategy for native bees, but it will come. I think the government, they have said that they will make such a thing, and they have invited different organizations to participate in that work. We are also experimenting with rewilding in Denmark, and it's showing very good results. And of course, I should also mention that a lot of research is done on the universities in Denmark. The next speaker after lunch, Yoko, she will tell more about that. And here I'll show the map that was introduced to the farmers in the campaign for bee-friendly farmers. It's a map with 10 recommendations telling the farmer what can he do on his farm to create better conditions for bees. They are rated, and perhaps you could see that a thing like flower stripes, is rated very, very low. That's perhaps surprising for some, but flower stripes, if the soil is treated and plowed every year, it's not much worse for wild bees. It should be all the small habitats around the fields, in the corner of the fields, and the wet areas in the fields that should be protected. That's much more important than make flower stripes. Well, thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Jørgen. That was great.